Last summer was expected to be the decisive moment when Russia would finally capture the Ukrainian fortress city of Pokrovsk. The crucial logistical hub was supposed to fall under the weight of 110,000 soldiers that Vladimir Putin dedicated to an offensive under which Ukraine was meant to crumble. If Pokrovsk fell, the rest of Donetsk would follow. Yet, as we approach the end of September, Pokrovsk still stands. While that in itself is disastrous for Russia, what is happening to the dwindling number of troops stationed near Pokrovsk is far worse. Ukraine has successfully trapped thousands of Russian troops in a deadly cauldron, a kill zone with no escape. On September 25th, Euromaidan press reported that Russian troops in Pokrovsk had been encircled and cut off from Russia's main forces. Ukraine completed the encirclement by eliminating a Russian salient through a combination of ground maneuvers and the clever use of drone swarms. The ground troops retook territory, pushing Russian soldiers deeper into the trap, while the drones created zones of death through which any attempted escape would lead to near certain destruction. Few Russian soldiers survived these suicidal attempts to break out. The story begins in the Dobropilia sector outside Pokrovsk, where Ukrainian forces pressed hard, dismantling Russia's offensive lines and forcing its soldiers into isolated groups, creating a large pocket of trapped Russian forces. Now that group is struggling to defend itself against both hundreds of Ukrainian drones and relentless ground attacks. On September 19th, President Volodymyr Zelensky hailed the Dobropilia operation as a significant success, noting that Ukraine had retaken 160 square kilometers of land. Russia, true to form, ignored the disastrous situation rather than acknowledge its losses. In Pankivka, a village in the Dobropilia sector, Ukrainian troops pushed southward, liberating the settlement by mid-September thanks to the Azov Corps. Since mid-August, Azov fighters have played a key role in cutting off Russian salients threatening Pokrovsk and then reclaiming nearby villages that Russia intended to use for a multi-pronged assault. After liberating Pankivka, Russia attempted a weak counterattack, mustering only 4 infantry units and a marine regiment, many of whom were annihilated en route by Ukrainian preemptive strikes and drone swarms. One Russian attempt to send just 10 soldiers toward Pankivka ended in disaster, as drones shredded 9 of them before they could even surrender, with only one surviving to raise a white flag. Motorcycle assault groups, introduced by Russia to minimize losses of armored vehicles from drone strikes, fared no better. Entire groups were wiped out before reaching the village, further proof that Ukraine's strategy accounted not only for the trapped soldiers inside the cauldron but also for any outside reinforcements. Ukrainian forces intercepted every attempt long before it could make a difference. A Russian supply van carrying munitions was struck and exploded in a fireball, highlighting Russia's inability to sustain its forces. Supplies vanished along with the soldiers meant to deliver them, while drones continued to dominate the skies, turning entire stretches of land into lethal gray zones. The Azov Corps Lieutenant Colonel Lemko, speaking to the Times on September 25th, explained how Ukraine tactically encircled Russian troops in 3 separate cauldrons in the Dobropilia sector, pointing to digital maps that illustrated the maneuvers. Despite being outnumbered 40,000 Ukrainians against more than 100,000 Russians, Ukraine achieved success through maneuver, defense, and rapid decision-making. Putin's strategy relied on sheer manpower, using waves of expendable troops to deplete Ukrainian morale and ammunition. But Azov introduced tactics that isolated Russian groups, leaving them cut off and destroyed piecemeal. With reinforcements and supplies failing to arrive, Russia's advantage in numbers collapsed under Ukrainian precision. Colonel Valentin Manko of Ukraine's assault troops confirmed that Russian soldiers in the cauldrons had been cut off for 3 weeks, with drones continuously patrolling overhead and artillery sealing every exit. These troops, already running out of food and medical supplies, faced only 3 choices: surrender, die, or attempt a hopeless withdrawal. President Zelensky emphasized Ukraine's successes, announcing that since mid-August, Ukrainian forces had liberated 160 square kilometers and cleared an additional 170, retaken 7 settlements, and cleared 9 more. Russia, meanwhile, has suffered around 2,500 casualties in the Pokrovsk area, with 1,300 killed outright. Despite its losses, Russia still attempts to launch counteroffensives. Ukrinform reported that Moscow dispatched so-called elite marine and airborne brigades, along with motorized rifle regiments, to Pokrovsk, though their effectiveness is questionable. Reports indicate that many of these elite troops are sick, afflicted with diseases like hepatitis and HIV, forced into segregated units marked with armbands. Such soldiers, deprived of proper medical care, are little more than expendable cannon fodder. Putin's callousness ensures their likely deaths, while his healthier, better-trained forces remain trapped in Ukrainian cauldrons. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to exploit Russia's weaknesses. Long-range drone strikes on Russian oil refineries have caused havoc inside Russia itself, compounding the failures around Pokrovsk. Putin's summer offensive has collapsed, and as autumn advances, the little ground Russia gained is being rolled back. The irony is stark. Rather than encircling Pokrovsk, it is Russia's own troops who are surrounded, exhausted, undersupplied, and facing annihilation.